Ladies and gentlemen, stop what you're doing. Put down your phone. Close your other tabs. Because what I'm about to tell you is going to reshape everything you thought you knew about the future of women's basketball in America. The Indiana Fever just dropped a bombshell on social media today, and while everybody is sharing the video, liking the posts, and commenting fire emojis, almost nobody is paying attention to what this announcement actually means. They're missing the forest for the trees. They're seeing the shiny pictures and completely glossing over the strategic masterstroke happening right in front of their eyes. The Indiana Fever just announced a brand new practice facility, but let's be clear about something right now. This isn't just a building. This isn't just some concrete and glass thrown together to give players a place to shoot hoops. This is a $78 million, 108,000 square. The details of what this facility includes, when you strip away the marketing language and look at the amenities, you start to realize that every single element of this building has been strategically designed with specific players in mind. This isn't speculation. The team president, Kelly Christoph, said it explicitly. Every element of this facility has been intentionally designed around our players. Intentionally, that word carries weight. That word means they sat down, they thought about who their core players are, they thought about what those players need, what they want, what would make them never want to leave. And they built exactly that. Let's walk through what they're putting in this facility because the list reads like a wish fulfillment document for professional athletes who also happen to be multi-dimensional human beings with interests outside of basketball. First, you've got dual practice courts with state-of-the-art lighting, not one court, two, full regulation. This isn't some cramped gym situation where you're waiting for your turn. This is elite-level training infrastructure that rivals anything in professional sports. Then you've got the recovery suites. And when I say recovery suites, I'm not talking about a couple of ice baths and a massage table. I'm talking about dedicated spaces for the kind of cutting-edge recovery protocols that keep professional athletes performing at their peak well into their careers. Hydrotherapy pools, saunas, everything designed to reduce wear on the body and extend careers. But here's where it gets interesting. Here's where you start to see the fingerprints of intentional design for specific players. They're putting in a golf simulator. A golf simulator in a women's basketball practice facility. Now ask yourself, who on the Indiana Fever roster is known for their love of golf? Who has been photographed on courses, talked about their passion for the game, built part of their brand around being a golfer? Caitlin Clark. This isn't a coincidence. This is the organization saying, we know you, we see you, we're building this for you. And it doesn't stop there. They're building a nail, hair, and makeup salon inside the facility. They're building a content production studio, a full podcast room with professional equipment. And think about who's already been doing podcasts on the Fever roster. Aaliyah Boston and Sophie Cunningham already have content they're producing. The organization is literally building infrastructure to support their players' off-court ventures. They're saying, you don't need to go somewhere else to build your brand. You can do it right here in your basketball home. They're putting in a chef-driven nutrition program, not a cafeteria, not a vending machine, a program designed by professional chefs to fuel elite athletic performance. They're building childcare spaces, recognizing that players have families, have children, have lives that extend beyond the court. And they're acknowledging that supporting the whole person is what keeps talented players loyal to an organization. This facility is not about basketball. I mean, yes, obviously it's about basketball. There are courts, there are training spaces, there are all the things you'd expect. But the message being sent here is so much bigger than that. The message is, we are building a life for you here. We are creating an environment so comprehensive, so thoughtfully designed around your needs, that the idea of leaving becomes almost unthinkable. The renderings they released today show a facility that looks like something out of a corporate campus for a Fortune 500 company. Glass walls, modern architecture, spaces that flow into each other with purpose and intention. These aren't just pictures of a building, these are pictures of a vision. This is what Indianapolis wants women's basketball to look like. This is what they're betting the future on. And make no mistake, this is a bet. $78 million is not pocket change, even for a professional sports organization. This is an investment that only makes sense if you believe the returns are going to be there. And what are those returns? They're tied directly to Caitlin Clark staying in Indiana. They're tied to Aaliyah Boston developing into the dominant force everyone knows she can be. They're tied to building a dynasty, not just a competitive team. Kelly Christoph's statement was carefully worded, but the subtext was screaming. "This will set a new standard for women's sports," she said. "This will continue to position Indianapolis as the center of that momentum." The center, not a center, the center. Indianapolis is claiming the crown. They're saying, we're not just participating in the growth of women's basketball, we're going to be the epicenter of it. We're going to be the destination that every other organization measures themselves against. And here's the thing, it might actually work. When you think about what keeps elite athletes with organizations long-term, it's rarely just about money. Money matters, obviously, but the athletes who stay, who build legacies with single franchises, they stay because of environment. They stay because of culture. They stay because the organization makes them feel valued, supported, and understood as complete human beings, not just basketball machines. The Fever are building that environment from the ground up. They're literally constructing it in steel and glass and concrete. And when Caitlin Clark walks into that facility, when she sees the golf simulator, when she sees the content studio, when she sees the recovery suites and the nutrition program, she's going to feel seen in a way that a bigger market, a flashier city, simply cannot replicate just by waving a bigger check. Now, I want to talk about something else that's been bubbling under the surface of Fever discourse, because while this facility news is dominating the conversation today, there's another thread that we need to pull on: free agency. I know there are people out there who want to talk about Elena Smith. I know there are fans who've been obsessing over every rumor, every whisper, every supposed signal that the Fever might be making a play for her. And look, I get it. The desire to see this roster get even better is natural. When you've got a core as exciting as what Indiana has built, you want to see them add the pieces that could push them over the top. But here's what I've learned about free agency coverage in women's basketball. It can send you down a rabbit hole that leads nowhere but disappointment. Last year, there was all this speculation about Satou Sabally, and when it didn't materialize the way people expected, the frustration was real. People got burned. So I'm going to be careful here. I'm going to present the information without making promises that aren't mine to make. What I can tell you is this: there are smart basketball minds out there who are already thinking about contingencies, who are already asking, what if the obvious move doesn't happen? What's plan B? One name that's been floated is Jessica Shepard, formerly of the Minnesota Lynx. And when you look at her profile, when you look at what she brings to the table, there's a compelling case to be made that she could be exactly what the Fever need, regardless of what happens with any other free agent targets. Let's look at the numbers. Shepard averaged 8 points per game last season. She pulled down 7.3 rebounds per game. She contributed 2.6 assists per game. These aren't numbers that jump off the page and scream superstar, but that's not what the Fever need. The Fever need depth. They need reliability. They need someone who can do the dirty work. At 29 years old, Shepard is right at the peak of her athletic powers. She's not a project you're hoping develops. She's not a veteran on the decline. She's right in that sweet spot where physical capability meets experience. And perhaps most importantly, she would be affordable. In a league where salary cap management matters, where every dollar spent in one place is a dollar you can't spend somewhere else, being able to add quality without breaking the bank is valuable. Here's the scenario that makes Shepard particularly interesting for Indiana. Minnesota is reportedly pursuing Nafisa Collier. If they bring in a player of that caliber, Shepard's path to significant minutes becomes murky. Her role diminishes. Her value to that organization decreases even as her talent remains the same. What Indiana can offer her is something Minnesota can't: a starting role, the chance to be a foundational piece rather than a rotational player. The opportunity to prove herself on a bigger stage with more responsibility. And think about what happened to the Fever in those semifinals. Think about what happened when Aaliyah Boston got into foul trouble and eventually fouled out. The entire rebounding structure collapsed. Everything the Fever do on the glass runs through Boston, and when she was gone, there was no safety net. The team couldn't protect the boards, couldn't extend possessions, couldn't do the fundamental things that keep you in games at the highest level. Shepard is a rebounding specialist. That's her game. She's not going to space the floor like some players. She's not going to create offense at an elite level, but she will get on the glass. She will fight for every loose ball. She will give you the kind of physical presence that keeps possessions alive and opposing offenses from getting easy second chances. Is her game different from what Elena Smith might bring? Absolutely. Smith is a different profile entirely. Better defender, more versatile offensive game, different impact on spacing and floor balance. But basketball is about building rosters, not just collecting talent. Sometimes the player who fits what you need is more valuable than the player who has the bigger name. And there's precedent here. Last season, Shepard put up a triple-double against the Fever. She dominated Tiffany Mitchell in that game. She showed that when given the opportunity to be a primary contributor, she can take over games in ways that don't show up on highlight reels, but absolutely show up in win columns. The smart play might be to pursue Shepard regardless of what happens with other free agency targets. Even if the Fever land their top choices, having someone like Shepard on the roster provides insurance. It provides flexibility. It provides the kind of depth that separates good teams from championship teams. Think about what the Fever's weaknesses were last season. Think about why they're not preparing for a championship celebration right now. It wasn't because Caitlin Clark wasn't good enough. It wasn't because Aaliyah Boston wasn't talented enough. It was because when things got tough, when foul trouble hit, when the rotation shortened in crunch time, there weren't enough reliable bodies to pick up the slack. A player like Shepard solves that problem. She's not sexy. She's not going to generate the headlines that a big name signing would, but she might be exactly the kind of player who takes a very good team and makes them a great one. The Fever are clearly thinking long-term. You don't build a $78 million practice facility if you're thinking about next season. You build that kind of infrastructure if you're thinking about the next decade, if you're thinking about building something sustainable, something that attracts talent and retains talent and creates a culture that perpetuates success. And that's what makes this moment so fascinating. The Fever are operating on multiple timelines simultaneously. They're making moves that will pay dividends immediately. The facility will be ready for players to use, to experience, to fall in love with. But they're also making moves that position the organization for sustained excellence over years and years to come. The question now is whether other organizations can keep up. When you set a new standard, you force everyone else to respond, like the Liberty, the Aces, the Sun, all the teams that have been competing at the highest level. They're going to have to look at what Indiana is building and ask themselves if they can match it. Can they offer their players the same level of comprehensive support? Can they build facilities that make players feel valued as complete human beings? Indianapolis has thrown down the gauntlet. They've said, this is what women's basketball players deserve. This is the standard. And now everyone else has to decide whether they're going to meet that standard or watch their best players start looking toward Indiana as the promised land. The city itself matters too. Indianapolis isn't New York or Los Angeles. It's not a global destination, but it's a city with a legitimate basketball culture, with fans who care, with an infrastructure that supports professional sports at the highest level. The Fever aren't trying to compete on glamour. They're competing on substance. They're saying you might be able to find bigger markets elsewhere, but you won't find a better environment. And when you combine that environment with the players already in place, with Caitlin Clark's generational talent, with Aaliyah Boston's dominant potential, with Sophie Cunningham's veteran presence, you start to see the outline of something special. You start to see a team that could define an era. That's what this facility announcement represents. It's not just news about a building. It's a declaration of intent. It's the Indiana Fever telling the entire basketball world that they're not here to participate. They're here to dominate. They're here to build something that lasts. And they're willing to invest the resources, $78 million worth of resources, to make that vision a reality. So while everyone else is looking at the pretty renderings and commenting about how nice everything looks, understand what you're really seeing. You're seeing an organization going all in on the belief that they can be the center of women's basketball for the next generation. You're seeing a bet on Caitlin Clark, on Aaliyah Boston, on the idea that if you build it right, the talent will stay and the championships will follow. The Fever might retire legends from this roster. These players might never wear another uniform. And years from now, when we look back at this moment, we might recognize it as the turning point, the moment when one organization decided to stop competing on the same terms as everyone else and started redefining what professional women's basketball infrastructure should look like. Indianapolis is positioning itself as the capital of women's basketball, and today's announcement is the first brick in that monument. The question now is whether the rest of the league is watching and whether they're ready to respond. Let me know in the comments what you think. Is this facility going to lock up Caitlin Clark for the long haul? Are the Fever making the right moves in free agency? And can any other organization match what Indianapolis is building? Make sure you like this video. Make sure you subscribe, because this story is just getting started. The Fever are making moves, and the rest of the league better be paying attention.